Because they claim that the Quran, say, or the Bible for that matter, is the literal word of God. But more than that, they claim that their understanding of that word is correct, which means they conflate two things. Like, because you could imagine a situation where you had a book, and I'm not saying this is the case, it's an imaginative exercise, where you had a book that had all the answers, that was extraordinarily complicated. And so that when you read it, it wouldn't be obvious that you understood it, or perhaps it wouldn't be obvious that you didn't understand it either, but you're not going to be able to, you can't get an uninterpreted version of the book. And so the fundamentalist claim is far worse. It's that not only is there an absolute reality, truth, embedded in the book, but that their particular take on that absolute reality is the absolute take on that book. And so they conflate their own, they make an assumption of their own omniscience and then pass that off onto God.
So many of them can only be honestly interpreted one way. So to take, again, an example that will be not inflammatory to you, but makes the point, it just says that the remedy for theft in the Quran is to cut the hands off a thief. I mean, that is the unambiguous injunction. It's not an allegory. It's not. You have to indulge some kind of tortured interpretive scheme to avoid the shocking fact that the creator of the universe thinks you should live this way for all time. And people like ISIS, this is my claim, it's just, most of what is in these books, and this is what worries me about those books because they can't be edited, most of what's in the books is clearly not the best that humanity is capable of in the ethical domain, or in this... And so that way, it would have been much easier for Christians to have fought against slavery. And it's much harder for Muslims, frankly, to fight against it now. The problem is that, there's a point I made, I think, in my first book, is that the doors leading out of this kind of fundamentalism don't open from the inside. They get bashed open from the outside. And it's humanism, and it's secularism, and it's scientific rationality that has exerted such pressure, such winnowing pressure on Christianity, now for multiple centuries, that's why we're not encountering the Christians of the 14th century on a daily basis. We are essentially encountering Muslims of the 14th century, not only in the Middle East, but in our own societies, in terms of their intuitions about how we should all live, right? I mean, the fact that 0% of UK Muslims think homosexuality is acceptable, right? 0%. I mean, there's almost no question you can come up with where we could poll this society and say, do you think that the lizard king is living in the Oval Office? You never get a 0% response to any poll question, right? But if you ask Muslims on the streets of London, is homosexuality morally acceptable? Apparently, you can find no one who says it is. That's shocking, and it's not an accident, right? And it would be much easier if the book actually said, you can love anyone you want, and it's not a problem. You can say, well, it's not the central thrust of any of these books, but if you go to the books and try to figure out what the creator of the universe wants with respect to the owning and needless immiseration of other people, right? He expects you to keep slaves, and he's told you how to do it. Don't knock out their eyes and their teeth. If you're a Muslim, don't take other Muslims as slaves. But it's not an accident that the people who joined ISIS thought that it was absolutely kosher to take slaves, to take sex slaves, and they were even their use of their sex slaves was conducted as a sacrament, and that's not an accident. I mean, they were praying over the Yazidi girls before they raped them. So this is not unlike what many people expect. It's not that this doctrine is being used as a pretext for people who would otherwise do terrible things like take sex slaves and rape them. And so there's no net damage being done here by this belief system. No, these are, I would argue, in many cases, psychologically normal people who are simply convinced of the absolute veracity of these ideas. And in this case, the perfect example of Muhammad as the most self-actualized human who's ever existed. And, what did Muhammad do? Muhammad took sex slaves. Then once you grant that, and this is where there's a tension between, how we pursue the same goals. Like, as we've just established, we have many of the same goals. But insofar as you make religion look palatable, insofar as you suggest to your audience that they can have their religious cake and eat it too, they can have their reason, they can have their respect for science, they can have a 21st century worldview, but they can also hold on to everything they love in Christianity or fear to lose. It's undoubtedly mostly Christianity, but whatever, any religion. My concern is that it keeps us shackled to these Iron Age philosophies and these Iron Age conversations where we should be having a 21st century conversation about everything, ethics included.
Okay, so